Trita Parsi, Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. I want to talk to you about this backdrop, this military buildup that these talks are going on alongside. In your experience, in your estimation, how much does a military buildup like that on both sides have any influence at all on what is actually happening in the rooms where negotiations are taking place?
Well, the problem is that both sides seem to think that a military buildup, whether it is the U.S. moving a third of its navy there or the Iranians being ready and saying that they have their finger on the trigger, that both of them believe that it actually may improve their negotiating position. Even the Iranians, who obviously are in a much weaker position compared to the United States, tend to believe that a short but intense war in which they strike back very hard at the U.S., even though they will take huge hits, even though they're the weaker party, reality in their view is that the U.S. has far less of a pain tolerance than what Iran does. That this is something that would be very costly to Trump's presidency, his upcoming elections in Congress, etc. And as a result, Iran may be in a better negotiating position after this type of a confrontation. From the U.S. side, there is a belief that Iran is immensely weak. Building this military up, potentially using it, will force the Iranians to capitulate because they don't believe that it is going to be a particularly problematic military engagement.
Donald Trump has made it clear that he's expecting a fairly quick resolution to all of this, and yet, by all accounts, from the meetings that have been held so far, this seems to be sort of accepted on both sides that it is the start of what is going to be a prolonged process. What are the risks, do you think, that the Trump administration is going to run out of patience and may feel compelled to take some sort of military action?
Well, I think it very much goes back to what Vice President JD Vance said. He said that the Iranians are not ready to accept Trump's red lines. The question is, what are those red lines? If the red lines are what they used to be before the talk started last year, which was only that Iran could not have a nuclear weapon, then a deal should absolutely be possible. If Trump has changed his red lines and he has adopted the Israeli red lines of no enrichment, get rid of all of the missiles, etc., those are red lines that are designed to make sure that the talks fail. So if the administration wants this to actually succeed, it has to calibrate its red lines to make sure that they meet U.S. interests, but they're also realistic. Right now, I don't think they are either. It doesn't meet U.S. interests. It actually goes way beyond that and is trying to meet Israeli interests. And that makes them, by definition, unrealistic because the Israelis are trying to sabotage these talks. So I think the Trump administration actually could get a deal rather fast if they adopted the approach that they had earlier last year before they shifted their red lines to the Israeli red lines.
I'm just reading through a kind of brief transcript of JD Vance's statements to Fox News. One of the recurring phrases that it repeats in at least every second sentence in this, and it's quite a big page of stuff, is that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. That is one of our red lines. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If that is the case, and that is the message, it doesn't refer to ballistic missiles, it doesn't refer to regime change, it doesn't refer to proxies in the Middle East. He talks about Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Is that possibly an indication that, following on from what you were saying, this is the Trump administration trying to shift things back to a more manageable and more achievable goal of ultimately Iran not having a nuclear weapon?
It could be, but I fear that there is a disconnect between what is being said publicly and what is being said at the negotiating table. And this is done by both sides. But if it is a shift back to no nuclear weapons, then there are plenty of pathways to a solution. That's part of the reason why the JCPOA did work, because the Iranians are willing to agree to significant concessions that block any pathway they could have towards a nuclear weapon. But that does not entail closing down the entire nuclear program. They can still have enrichment, they can still produce nuclear fuel for civilian energy, etc. Those are the things they're not willing to give up. I think the Trump administration suffers from a belief that Iran is much weaker than it actually is. Clearly, it is weaker than it was before because of military successes that Israel has had. But it is not as weak as Trump seems to think that it is. And at the same time, the Iranians, I think, are overestimating the damage that they could impose on the United States in a short war, but also how Trump will react to that, because we have not seen a scenario yet in which Trump actually, during his presidency, you have 50 to 200 American soldiers killed. We haven't had anything even close to that. So we don't even know exactly how Trump would react to that type of a scenario. The Iranians, I think, seem to be calculating that he will react the same way that he did after a couple of weeks of warfare with the Houthis. But the Houthis never managed to kill a single American, and I think that's a significant difference.
There are two main parties, obviously, Iran and the US at the table, with Oman mediating between the two of them, going between the rooms. I want to ask you, though, of course, this is being watched very closely by other governments in the Gulf region, because they are the ones that may face tremendous risks in the event that this does go to a military conflict. Is there a role for other Middle East governments when it comes to influencing how Iran and indeed the US might be able to find ways to compromise in these negotiations?
Yes, I think both Turkey, Egypt, Saudi, Oman, Qatar, and to a certain extent Iraq at various points have played a very crucial and constructive role, and perhaps need to continue and intensify that role, because, as you mentioned, they have all reached the conclusion that a military confrontation would be devastating to the region as a whole and to their own interest, and as a result have a very keen interest in making sure that this is resolved diplomatically. And sometimes when two parties are completely locked in, partly because of their domestic politics, partly because of erroneous assumptions about the other side, mediating countries in the region that are trusted or are seen as trustworthy by both sides can and should play a crucial role in this. And again, the region has really stepped up. 15 years ago was the Europeans playing this role. Today, it's regional states.
Trita Parsi, Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, and we are grateful to you for being with us on Al Jazeera. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.